Aloha and welcome. I'm Mahialani Richardson from Hawaii News Now. On August 8th, Oahu voters will have an important decision to make, choosing the next mayor of Honolulu. Are people looking for change, or will it be a familiar face that tries to steer us out of one of the most difficult times in the city's history? We sat down with the 5 leading candidates for a no-holds-barred conversation on why they are the right candidate for the job. Tonight, our interview with former Mayor Mufi Hannemann. Aloha, Mufi Hannemann. It's so great to see you. Thanks for joining us. And we just wanted to launch right into the questions. Why should voters trust you to lead Oahu out of this pandemic crisis?
You know, I've had a front row seat in the past several months as the head of HLTA, a visitor industry organization that has been working side by side with our government officials to ensure that we can get us to a better place in dealing with this pandemic, concentrating on hygiene standards that we felt was very, very important, not only for our employees, but for the people of Hawaii to have confidence that we're ready once the government says we will welcome travelers again. And in so doing, I was struck by the number of stories that I would hear from people, individuals who worry whether they're going to get their next paycheck, renters who worry about their families not being able to live in their own homes, health insurance benefits set to expire soon, wondering how they're going to be able to take care of their families. Businesses who are being shuttered and know that they're not going to be able to make ends meet to open up quickly and to start hiring back some of their employees because of the losses they have incurred while being shuttered, and at the same time looking down the road, their property taxes to be paid in August. Costs that are escalating as a result of making sure that they're all part of the new normal in going forward, whether it's purchasing PPE equipment and all the extra technology that they're going to embrace now in going forward. But then, as I try to do my best to help businesses that are shut, especially those who are offering food on a takeaway basis, more often than not, I run into a homeless person or two who tells me that they're trying to get a job, but they can't get a job. It's being exacerbated by this situation. As I offer them food to share with their families, little stories like, I feel so bad that I couldn't even buy a graduation gift for my daughter, for my son. Knowing all these things has led me to believe that it's time for someone of my background to enter the race again. Why? I've been a mayor. With all due respect to my very worthy contenders for this position, if you're a legislator, you specialize in making laws. You don't execute, you don't implement, you don't release funds for major projects. My other worthy competitors who come from a small business background, from the nonprofit world, from the community, they have no idea what it takes to run a city with 10,000 employees, multi-billion-dollar operating budget, 18 city departments across the day, because they've never held office at the city level, no experience. So as I'm saying, this is no time for on-the-job training. You need someone that can hit the ground running. And I've led through times of crisis. I was the mayor when we went through the 2008-2009 economic recession. Things were difficult then. I had to cut the budget. I had to take away the nice to have and focus on the need to have. I had to make sure that the unions were in a good place in negotiating their furloughs and their pay cuts, something that the state had done through a top-down decision-making with Furlough Fridays. And I was able to do that without raising property taxes. And that was the economic recession in 2008, 2009. And then I had that phenomenal sewage spill occur under my watch. Not 1 million, not 10 million, 48 million gallons of raw sewage that spilled into the Alawai because I had no choice. But I used that with a leadership mantra I've developed very early in my life: make every crisis and turn it into an opportunity. So what I did with that was not only fix the problem at hand, make a commitment that no mayor would raid from the sewer fund, as been done in previous years, but also I settled 2 important disagreements with the city. One was with the Sierra Club. that had a decades-long lawsuit against the city. We resolved that. Secondly, the EPA had a consent decree upon the city because we had been negligent in our care for the wastewater system. I rolled up my sleeves, we negotiated a consent decree that put us in a better place. And then in my second term as mayor, Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard was on the brink of closing. I flew off to Washington. I sought that final vote proactively by working with Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. And the congressional delegation and their staffers acknowledged the key role that I played to keep Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard open. So that's in my DNA, to be able to go into a job, like the mayor position again, and resolve situations in a crisis that we have never seen ever before.
Mufi, we wanted to delve into some of the tourism and business issues that you talk about in Stewart. I know you had some questions on that.
Right, so you mentioned property taxes. Would you give a property tax break to the hotels, given that many have been shut down for months now?
I will look at giving property tax breaks to everyone across the board, every business, not just hotels. I think that's important. I was able to balance a budget in 2008, 2009 without raising property taxes. I really believe first things I will do is what I did when I was mayor back in 2004. I commissioned a private sector review, all volunteers. And I said to them to look at the budget, tell me what is it that you think that we're spending unnecessarily on, and at the same time maintain essential city services. I recognize that revenues have to come in the city, but this is where I come in again. I've had a tremendous opportunity through the years to develop public-private partnerships, being able to draw upon the private sector to help us. I will chase every federal funding opportunity in Washington, D.C. What I bring to the table is someone who not only has Democratic relationships, but has Republican relationships. And I think that's a major difference because your mayor has to do that. So if it's a Trump administration, if it's a Biden administration, I have relationships. And I will be able to go back there and see where are the opportunities to bring in revenues to the city. Having said that, if in fact that's not enough, yes, I will look to see how we can give property tax breaks because we have to get businesses going now, not later.
As we've discussed, some of the hotels are some of the biggest property tax payers in the city. It seems like it would be very difficult to give some of these a total break.
Well, as I'm saying, let me get in there, let me start the dialogue, let me look at it, but there's no question in my mind. They shouldn't be permitted or asked to give a full property tax payment this August.
On the other side, do you think you can really stand up to the industry given that you're working for it now?
Well, I think that's one of the advantages I bring into this race. I have long-standing relationships. When I did my health and safety standards, I had to deal with 2 unions and non-union hotels. That's what I'm all about, collaboration. I will bring them to the table, we'll talk it through, and I understand what they're going through. Some of them are losing $1 million to $1.5 million a day trying to stay open.
Mufi, can I ask, so you're not planning to give up the job with the Lodging Association? When will you give up that job and reassure the public that you're going to be the mayor for everyone on the island, not just for the tourist industry?
When and if I get elected.
So you're not going to give up the job until you're elected?
Absolutely not. There's no reason to. Once again, this is not my first rodeo. If a mayor gets elected in November, he has a month and a half to put together his cabinet. And I did a wonderful cabinet. A cabinet that came away with an 80% approval rating. I know how to do that. My commitment to the industry is to stay as long as I can because it's important that the visitor industry be able to come back. I mean, let's be clear. There's no local economy if tourism doesn't come back. $17 billion in revenues, $2 billion in taxes, and it employs over 200,000 people. So it will be a smooth transition. Think of it like Josh Green, our esteemed lieutenant governor. He's got 2 jobs. He's a lieutenant governor and he's a full-time physician. And that's what I'm doing now. Full-time position is HLTA, hang on. Full-time position is with HLTA, and I'm campaigning to make the case to send somebody back to their old job because they know how to do that job.
But you're not worried that people will think you have a special loyalty to that industry if you're mayor?
Oh, absolutely not. I think it's an advantage. Why not have someone from the hospitality industry? It's not just the hotels. Now, keep in mind, our organization, if you look at it, is a big tent. That's why it's no longer called the Hawaii Hotel Association. It's Hawaii Lodging and Tourism. So the attractions are part of it. Small businesses are a part of it. Airlines are a part of it. Major stakeholder, ground transportation. So this is being wholeheartedly endorsed by the board of HLTA for me to stay as long as I can to do the job with them and then make that seamless transition. You see me right now. I'm not neglecting those responsibilities at all.
I just want to make clear, if you are elected mayor either in August or November, you're going to leave the lodging
Oh, absolutely.
association. Yeah.
I thought it was clear. You cannot hold two jobs.
Well, Kirk Caldwell does. He
Well,
actually has,
you know what?
He serves on the board of territorial savings, and there's been a lot of criticism. There's been a bill to change
Sure.
that. As mayor, you would hold one job.
I would hold one job. That's Kirk Caldwell. I'm Mufi Hannemann.
So,
Mufi, I wanted to know, there are people, even those who have lost their jobs, but they are enjoying Waikiki without the tourists, and they know that tourism has to come back. But what do you say to those people who have really enjoyed this break that Hawaii has had?
I say to them, we have an opportunity now to rebrand Hawaii. I want a resilient tourism. I want a sustainable tourism industry. I've always been big about community-based engagement. And I think they need to be a part of how we rebrand Hawaii to make sure that whatever we have in Waikiki or in other resort areas is not exclusively for visitors. It's also for our residents. And let's keep in mind, Mahealani, you're not gonna have 10 million visitors come here overnight. It ain't gonna happen. Airlines are now going to be able to have 60% seating capacity to come here. It's going to be more expensive because we're going to ask them to test before they come here. So I've said this in the 90s when I was the director of DBED, and everyone is looking at it now. We want quality travelers here, not quantity. And I'm going to look to do more of the Hannemann Bay type of legislation I did as a council member in my mid-90s when the current mayor then wanted to charge a fee for Hannemann Bay, but he wanted to put it into the general fund. I said nada, and I led the council's resistance to that to say, yes, it's okay to have an impact fee, but make sure it goes back to a special fund that will be back for that bay, not only for visitors to enjoy, but for residents. So I'm very pleased that the council is looking at that, strengthening that, because that's the kind of tourism that I want, including sitting at the table, which I am right now with the Native Hawaiian community. It is important that they be a part of the engagement process, and I'm prepared to do that.
whoever wins this race will take office in a time of a tremendous financial crisis. And you've talked about giving property tax abatements to the hotel industry.
Well, excuse me, Colin, not just the hotel industry. I'm talking about businesses.
Sure,
I want to be clear.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay,
but
thank
that
you.
means there'll be less revenue for the city.
Yes, absolutely.
So what would you look at cutting? Because, I mean, there'll be money from the federal government, but some things will have to be cut. Would it be city employee salaries? Would it be programs? What are you looking at?
I think everything's on the table. Everything's on the table. Now keep in mind, I'm going to inherit a budget from this administration. He signs it into law in June, no different than when I became mayor the first time. I inherited Mayor Harris's budget. But I always believe there's fat in every budget. There's nice to have versus need to have. So I will look to pare that down. I'm glad that the mayor now is no longer pursuing the Waimanalo District, Waimanalo Park improvements there at Sherwood. I believe if there's funding in the budget to do the Blaisdell, I don't think this is the time to do that. I will look to cut that. I will also look at other measures that he's put forward that I really feel is all about legacy as opposed to doing what is important for the next mayor. So we'll cut to the bone. I did that the first time around. I talked about a mayor's review with people from the community trying to help me identify where that cut should be done. And then most importantly, look for additional revenues to be coming in. I mentioned earlier about looking at public-private partnerships that can help us with some of these things as opposed to relying totally on government funding. And then being able to go to Washington and also seek federal funding in this regard. There's no question, essential city services must be maintained. That's the core of it. And if in fact there has to be salaries or pay cut reductions, I'm willing to do that first. I did that in 2008, 2009. We took a 5% pay cut across the board. Then I sat down with the unions and asked, look, let's negotiate this. Let's not do a top-down like the state did. And let's see what you're willing to put on the table. I've had successful discussions with that in the past. I believe if I explain that we've cut to the bone and this is the only way to go and we're willing to lead by example, so be it.
Can I just circle back to finish off on the tourism angle? What is it that you could do to actually change this mix so you have the quality, high-spending tourists versus the cheeseburger in paradise type folks? And And specifically when you talk about Hannemann Bay, right, the increase is like from $7.50 to $10. Would you see that premier attraction being worth, say, $20, $30, $40 a day, and that sort of thing apply to other attractions as well?
Well, I think that should be a commonplace practice to all city attractions, not private, city attractions. And I believe that whether it's $10, $15, $20, that has to be done in consultation with the council. I've always done a collaborative approach. That's why, as mayor, every bill that we vetoed never got overturned by the council because I engaged in that process up front. So it's no different if we're looking at other attractions. I'd like to do that. When I talk about a sustainable or resilient tourism, I like to go after the illegal vacation rentals. I think they are causing some major problems in neighborhoods.
How big a dent is that?
Well, that's a big dent. Some say of the 10 million visitors, 2 million could be attributed to vacation rentals. And I want to be clear in my position there. I have no problem. I support vacation rentals in areas that are resort designated, where they're legally zoned, as long as they pay the TAT and the GET. And I think we need to rein in on that. I believe the county's missed a major opportunity during this crisis to really rein in on them because they made them illegal, but it was still happening. They should have had a hotline to help people if it's happening in your neighborhood illegally. If they're flouting the quarantine laws, call 911 or call whatever number that is to be able to tamp down on it. And I think that will help with the quality visitors argument because then they're competing with us where they should be designated.
Mufi, we wanted to move on to some of the issues over law enforcement and police.
You know what's been going on with the country, the George Floyd killing, all the marches, Black Lives Matter. Here at home, former Chief Louis K. Aloha, his wife, or maybe ex by now, Catherine K. Aloha, in the prosecutor's office. There's a sense that we don't have confidence at the Honolulu Police Department. As mayor, of course, you'd be in charge of appointing commissioners. How would you restore trust in HPD so that folks could feel like the men and women in blue are doing their job right?
Well, it is a major priority of any mayor, public health and safety. When I was mayor, I made sure that was a priority. We funded it well. We approved pay raises for them because I felt it was important for law enforcement officials, because when you call 911, you want to know whether it's police, firefighter, lifeguards, emergency medical services personnel can respond and respond efficiently and be able to do their job. There's no question now there's some changes that might have to be made. I like what Chief Ballard is doing, is stepping up and offering some of those changes. I believe this is no different than the mayor's review of the budget. I will conduct a mayor's review, not just of the police commission, but all law enforcement.
But just to follow up to that, the criticism of the police commission is that it's too weak and that Chief Ballard has too much authority. You know, Steve Levinson and Loretta Sheehan just left. I mean, where do you stand? Would you look at reforming the police commission and give it some teeth?
That's what I'm saying. There's an opportunity now to look at the whole process, not just at the department, but also at the commission level. There's been a lot of resignations that have taken place. So this is the perfect time with a new mayor coming in, because you don't have to be encumbered by past positions. I can come in now having the experience I've been there before, but most importantly, recognizing what's going on in the country. Having said that, I'm doing something I don't believe anyone else is doing. I'm beginning discussions right now with groups in Hawaii, if we can call them ethnic minority groups, who may be susceptible to the kind of things that we've seen in terms of not giving a fair break or feeling discriminated at, whether it's real or perception. And so I'm talking with Micronesian leaders. I'm talking with African American leaders. I'm talking about Hispanics who now come in and work on our macadamia nut orchard plantation. And then all the other immigrant groups that have been here for a long time. You know, we can improve. I come from an immigrant family. And I still hear today from people of Polynesian ancestry some of the things that are going on.
The concerns that many people have raised, that there's systemic racism in the police, the criminal justice system, even here in Hawaii.
Well, I want to go back to what I heard as an 8-year-old, as a Cub Scout in Waikiki, when I went with my Cub Scout troop and I laid eyes on the first president of the United States that I've ever seen was President John Kennedy. I'll never forget the words of that day. He said something to the effect, Hawaii should be striving to what the rest of the world should be striving to what Hawaii is, something to that effect. And I really believe we've been a paragon of virtue in the spirit of aloha, and we also have to continue that. And it's important for people to know that whether they come here and they've been here 1 year, 1 month, or a lifetime, that they are entitled to all the rights and benefits of an American citizen. And that's what the mayor does. He upholds those laws so no one feels discriminated.
You know, right now, police officers are first responders to emergencies, but also social issues like homelessness. Do you support calls from activists to relocate funds from the police department to social service programs specifically designed to deal with people who are in crisis and might not need to be arrested?
Well, I think the whole budget is obviously up for review, but I think there's other ways perhaps to help some of those social service issues. I mentioned federal funds.
So you wouldn't move from the police department?
Well, I wouldn't automatically do that, but I'll look at it. I'll look to see whether in fact we can shift some funds. But at the end of the day, there's many ways a creative mayor like myself that has been there to leverage additional funding or reprogram areas, for example, in the Department of Community Services, which is the closest that comes to a Department of Health. They have federal grants that come there that they disseminate to various groups across the country. I did that when I was mayor before because I had a very efficient director of the Department of Community Services. Every federal grant that the department received, we never lapsed any federal funds. And that's what I would like to do, see what the Caldwell administration is committed to. And if in fact they're not going to be able to utilize all of that, I'll look to see how we can reprogram some of those funding monies to these areas of social services that we should help the state with, who has a primary responsibility for that, but together work to see how we can come up with the funding necessary.
On that note with community services, during your previous time as mayor, your administration's stance on homelessness was that it was really the state's job, and homelessness increased on the island during your tenure. Do you acknowledge today that homelessness is part of the mayor's job description?
I think we answered this before with you, but I'll restate it again. Here's what it is. There's a very different environment today. The county and the state are working together on resolving homelessness. That wasn't the case during my time, unfortunately. We had to focus on cleaning up Ala Moana Park, parks all the way to the Waianae coast. I felt at that time, because we didn't have a Department of Housing, let's partner with the state.
But in the absence of state leadership, isn't it the mayor's job to step up and offer housing vouchers or build public housing?
Let me set the context again for you, okay? At that time, that was what I was trying to get the state to do. There was resistance. So we did a great job of cleaning the parks, but we weren't able to meet the task of being able to relocate them to housing. This time around, as I said, it's very, very different. I'm going to bring in new ideas and new ways to fund it. With the Hawaii Lodging and Tourism Association, we raised over $2.7 million last year. It's the most successful fundraising organization in the state, and we deal with homelessness. I took $1 million of that funding, went to the state, and asked them for matching funds. So now, an organization that used to get $25,000 got $50,000 as a result of that. I plan to do the same. Why? Because the state is cooperating. So that's my point. We will take lessons learned from the past, but more importantly, new ideas that we bring to the table, and therefore be able to address homelessness from the housing perspective, because the city now does housing.
You mentioned clearing out Ala Moana Park, which happened in 2006. 200 homeless people, including children, were displaced without a place to go. And homeless sweeps are now a daily occurrence under Mayor Kirk Caldwell's administration. Is that something that you would continue, that practice of sweeps?
Let me slightly correct, because you weren't here during that time. We actually gave them a place to go. Okay, wait, hang on. No, hang on. Slow your roll. Okay, we actually gave them a place to go when we took them out of Ala Moana Park. There's a park area there next to the Honolulu Police Department. We provided them a place to go. They did not want to go. So it's incorrect to say that we did not do that. We did do that.
Was that offered after protests at Honolulu?
No, it wasn't offered after protests. We had that in the mix. Again, you weren't here during that time. So I'm just trying to bring you up to date.
I was here at that time,
yes.
and that was a temporary thing. And by the way, it was at the police station, not the most comforting place for homeless people and their children. And I think the point that Christina ultimately is trying to make, the feeling was, the sentiment, your record seems to suggest that you said homelessness was a state problem. Well, here's what Linda Lingle did at the time. She set up the Next Step shelter in Kaka'ako, which, by the way, was also supposed to be temporary and is still there. So while we appreciate the context, there's this sense that you really did not take leadership on this. You shoved it to the state.
Again, we did not have a housing department at that time. You know that.
I do.
The Ever Villages scandal basically led voters to say, abolish the Department of Housing. Okay. So I stayed in my lane. My lane was police and parks. We needed the state's help. What I'm saying now, fast forward to where we are today, there is a different spirit of cooperation that exists. And we're working with them right now from HLTA. I mentioned the homeless matching funds. We're bringing in the concept of repatriation, which the state did not want to do. And that is to be able to send homeless people back to the mainland, connect them with a loved one. We pay half the fare, they pay half the fare, and therefore be able to bring a new idea that should have been done years ago. So this is what I'm talking about. I really think you're going to see much more progress in that regard because the city and the state are working together. That did not happen the previous time.
You mentioned working with the state. What's your relationship like with Governor Ige, and what's your plan to work with the legislature on some of these larger issues?
I told Governor Ige I'm going to be his best friend. He and I go a long way back in Pro City and IAEA. We both started off, he was there before I was. And I really believe this. We have a governor. He's going to be there for 2 more years. So for all of those that say, you know, get rid of him, whatever, blah, blah, you know what? He's the governor. He's an honest and decent man. He's well-intentioned. And he's got 2 more years to go. What I bring is a leadership style I exhibited as a mayor. You never saw Mayor Kinoy of Hawaii Island. You never saw Mayor Carvalho of Kauai. You never saw Mayor Tavares of Maui go anywhere without Mayor Mufi. That is what is missing right now. I really believe, if you look at this as the starting 5 of basketball, it's the governor, 4 county mayors, and our super sub, Dr. Josh Green. I really want to bring in that collaborative style of leadership that I had back then to the current slate of mayors, and I know them very well. We endorse them as an HLT organization. Mayor Victorino, Mayor Kawakami, I've known Mayor Kim for a long time, should he be successful again. I believe that is what is needed now, and I'll give you a good example of this. The CARES Act funding that came to Oahu first, and they got the lion's share of that, almost $380 million. I would not have released those funds as early as the present mayor did if I knew the neighbor island mayors were still without their CARES Act funding.
Mufi, in 2010, you said that there were 2 things that people hold against you, your Mormon faith and your Samoan background, and that it has made it difficult to win elections. Why do you think people hold those 2 things against you?
Well, I think things have evolved. I think things have been different. I think they're used to seeing Mufi. Everybody know what's a Mufi. They may not always like the Mufi, but I'm there. So I think things have evolved, obviously.
Well, your resume is deep, and your name recognition, obviously, people know who you are. But many people have this visceral reaction to you. What can you say to make people change their minds about you?
Well, I'm saying this at this time. First of all, going back to your question, because I don't think I adequately answered that. You know, I stand by the beliefs and values that I've had growing up, but obviously I've always been someone who has tried to do the right thing, and sometimes people were so quick to dismiss that. I'm hoping over time that's evolved. And I understand there's still a lot of concerns about rail, and I hope we get to that during the course of this interview. You know, I'm a person that's driven by public service. I don't say this lightly, but I'm giving up a salary that's like this to go back to a job like here. And the only reason why I'm doing that is I'm concerned about the people. If I were prepared to move to the mainland and be there and with my family and not look to Honolulu as the place of my birth, I would not be running for mayor. I would say, bye, bye, Miss American, bye, and jump on the plane. But I'm going to be here. And I was taught by my parents, to whom much is given, much is required. And I feel if I have these skill sets in times of crisis, you need to step up. And so I would ask those who perhaps are, oh, there goes Mufi again. Think of it this way. If this was normal times, if this was a time of prosperity, take a chance on someone who's never been a mayor before, because there's time to learn the job as we go along. But you're talking about someone now who's going to step in the worst critical economic situation of our times. Take someone who's been tested, take someone who is strong, take someone who's collaborative to get us through this economic mess. My campaign mantra is this: if you put me back in my old job, I'll work very hard to put you back at yours. So I really believe it comes down to economics. It's an economic crisis. If you believe that you're going to get your job next year or next month and you're going to be fully employed and pay all your bills, then don't look at a Mufi Hannemann. But if you believe you're going to struggle, which we all are, and that's everyone saying that, from economists, from business folks, from labor folks, we are going to struggle. It's going to struggle into 2021, which is why you need someone of my ability and skill sets.
But,
yes,
you know,
Darren.
but the way you're picturing this is as an economic crisis, but it's also a public health crisis. And what I'm wondering about is, do you feel like we've taken too long to reopen? Do you feel like the governor was too hesitant and maybe too quick to close the door to tourism? How do you feel about those decisions when they were made?
I feel the time is now. We can open safely. You have both the lieutenant governor and the governor agreeing. It has to be some form of testing. They're saying mandatory testing. That's fine. That's fine. All we're saying now is open sooner rather than later, and don't give us piecemeal announcements. The piecemeal was inter-island travel, but we still didn't know when the next step was going to take place, which is transpac travel. That's where the real dollars come in to stimulate the economy. So I believe if that happens, and it appears to be, in fact, they may be announcing it now as we're taping, that we're really close to seeing that happen. And I think that'll make everyone feel more at ease, not knowing, of course, how long it's going to take to come back, but more importantly, at least it gives them a schedule. And business is all about planning and having a schedule.
Just to follow up, though, were you satisfied at the front end? You mentioned the piecemeal announcements, but were you satisfied at the front end that the government wasn't overreaching and, like, for example, closing many, many small businesses that only had one product to sell while Walmart and the big box stores were able to sell the same products and remain open? Did they make good decisions at the front end?
Okay, so let me be clear. On the quarantine aspect of it, I think they were united and they made good decisions. But now we need to shift to the economic recovery phase. So let's be clear, the rules that they were putting out were arbitrary. They didn't seem to have any kind of pattern. I mean, one county would say, we're going to open this. The other county would say, we're going to open this. The state would oftentimes say, no, it's going to be this way. So people were confused. They didn't know what was going on. And so therefore, I believe, and I go back to that point, if it was consistent, if it was unified, and they gave us set schedules and deadlines, I think we'd be a better place today in terms of economic recovery. Not saying that that's going to solve all our problems economically, but at least have business owners be able to schedule these things, because there's going to be a tendency for people to feel that once travel is open, everybody's going to go back to work. Right. That's not going to happen.
Right.
Yes.
So Mufi, so what can happen? We know it's going to take a while for tourism to pick back up again, as we've discussed. What can you do to create jobs to fill the gap? We have 150,000 people statewide, roughly, unemployed, many of them here. What can you do as mayor to create jobs for the people who won't be able to go back to tourism?
Well, let me put it this way. I want to save jobs. And the sooner that we can reopen, the more that I can work with business owners, not just hotel owners, small business owners, to get them back on their feet. So if there's ways for us in the city to help that, I believe we can. So if someone is sitting for a permitting process, for a permitting application that's been sort of put on hold, and they need that to be able to install new equipment for the new normal, I'd like to expedite that. I'd like to see if there's incentives at the city, and that's why I talked about property taxes being there. It may not be a full-on waiver, it could be a deferral that we would look at, and then manage wisely. The other thing too is that, whether it's a Trump administration or Biden administration, there'll be economic stimulus package, especially in the area of construction. There could be an opportunity there to be able to create new jobs in that area there. So I believe having someone like my background that's done this before in an economic recession can be able to be very creative, look at what the private sector can be at the table, and then knowing that you have a mayor that's not going to waste money. That was one of the mantras of the administration. We were able to mine the money of the people very carefully and be able to balance our budget that resulted in tremendous opportunities.
What about, last question, for current jobs, increasing a minimum wage to say $20 an hour for Honolulu or for the tourism industry?
Can you restate that again?
A minimum wage. Would you support increasing or imposing a minimum wage of, say, $20 an hour for the tourism industry? As you know, the union says one job should be enough. What about that?
Stu, we got to be really clear here, okay? Businesses are struggling to come back. Okay, they've got losses, and you know that. You reported on this very well in Civil Beat. How can you now say to them, as you open jobs, we want you to increase the minimum wage? That's another expense. So I believe as the economy gets better, absolutely it's on the table, but let's get the businesses back on their feet. Why in the world would you say to them right now that they have to increase their minimum wage? The other thing too, it's not done at the city level. It's a state issue. If the state says they want to increase it, obviously we'll have to figure out how we do that. But I would rather focus my efforts on trying to get businesses that have been closed jobs that have been lost, people have been worried about where the next paycheck is going to come. I want to put them back to work. And I think that should be the emphasis at this point.
Mufi, in almost every poll, the #1 concern of Honolulu residents is affordable housing. What's the first thing you would do to address that problem if you were elected?
Every affordable housing opportunity that's before us, whether it's in the Department of Planning and Permitting or elsewhere in the city department, I'm going to say this is a wartime effort now. We are at war. This is crisis. So all the rules and regulations that we would adhere to strictly, or the conditions that we put on it in good times, let's look to see, be a little more flexible, a little more creative. And if it's on the table, let's do it, especially if we had an opportunity with federal funds there, or a private sector that's willing to put in most of the money for these affordable housing projects. I really believe the future of affordable housing is with rail, with transit-oriented development that'll take place. Why that's so important is because of the fact that along the TOD line sitting right outside the studio, from Middle Street to downtown Chinatown, the state's goal is 10,000 affordable housing units. And that's the beauty of TOD, is that it will create that. And I think you're going to see a plethora of affordable housing that will occur as a result of rail being run efficiently and also finding the right way to fund it going forward.
Mufi, you talk about transit-oriented development, but what about the people of West Oahu? If and when rail is finally completed, will people of West Oahu finally see relief in their commute?
I believe so, because you're going to give them options to deal with that traffic gridlock. Right now, it's the car, the bus, or some kind of ride sharing. Why not have rail be part of an integrated multimodal system? So when they get up in the morning, like other cities that have it, you have a choice. If you want to take your car to a certain part, you park it, you take the rail, you get off it. If you want to walk, you ride the bus. I think will bring that kind of relief that they need. I also want to say real clearly now, and this is the time to say it, rail has exploded in costs in the past 10 years that I've been out of office. I'm not into pointing fingers. Well, all I'm going to say is this, as a guy who started it, I want to go back and fix it. And I want to make it clear, we will not finance rail through taxpayers' dollars, through real property taxes. The construction of rail would not be done that way. I said that back in 2005. Somehow now there's an agreement from the city to put skin in the game, so they'll have to float some bonds backed up by property taxes. Once that commitment is over, I will not use property taxes. I will use private sector dollars, federal funds, and if we get to a point where there's not enough money, I will halt and pause the project and defer projects. I will not use property taxes to fund the construction of rail.
Let me ask, there seems to be a consensus out there, including rail critics and supporters and some auditors, that in your ambition to be governor back when rail was just getting underway, you misled the people about its purpose, you understated the cost, you issued contracts prematurely, and ultimately caused a lot of waste and overruns. That's what they say. How do you answer that?
Absolutely, look at the facts. Before we issued that first contract, there were 3 sets of approvals. Number 1, the Federal Procurement Code had to be adhered to, checked. Federal Transit Administration also had to give it an okay, checked. At the city and state level, we had to make sure we were in the procurement code. So a former governor actually issued a lawsuit, a protest with the Attorney General's Department at that time to review the contract as it was given out. The Attorney General's office turned it over to the State Procurement Office, and they dismissed all the charges. You can look it up. That release was done in August of 2010. So we did proceed legally. The cost did get out of control because of the numerous delays. So once again, I state, when I was there, we were on time, on budget, on schedule, with all federal and state requirements to proceed. Now, the cost went from $5 billion when I left to $9 billion. I was not there. So that's why I'm saying, going forward, you need someone that's going back there, sort through the mess, and then figure out how do we get this thing done properly. Because if we stop it now, if we tear it down, minimum $8.63 billion would have to be paid by the taxpayers. And that's not even counting the litigation and lawsuits that would take place.
Let me just say though, that, I mean, you are in very many ways the face of the rail project, and it's one of the most.
Really, this face here?
I'm afraid so. I think that's just a fact of the matter. But are you sitting here today and saying that you accept no responsibility for the condition of the project today?
No, not Darryl. You missed my point. I'm saying people will always question. There's always things that have been done better, what have you. But I want to be clear. People voted for this in 2008. 53% of the people voted for rail. Had they said at that point no rail, who am I? Even though the Obama administration wanted it, even though the Senator Inouye particularly wanted it, even though the legislature voted for the funding, even though the city council approved it, of course I would have said no. I abide by the will of the people, but they said yes. I felt an obligation to get it to a good point before I did the transfer or the handoff to the next administration. So there's been problems. I don't think we need to go into why those problems happen. All I'm saying is this is where it is at $9 billion. My job is to go and fix it, complete it, because it will bring tremendous benefits. Look at Aloha Stadium now. There'd be no talk of a new stadium were it not for rail. I want to be really clear of that. And that's going to be a public-private partnership. Look at the station outside of Pearl Harbor. They're going to have a military invest in that. So you're going to have a state-of-the-art TOD taking place right outside of Pearl Harbor. And you can say what you will about Kaka'ako, but it has increased property values that's brought in more property taxes into the city. Why? As mayor, I said, I want to see rail coming through. Now, going forward, in terms of are there lessons learned, I think what mayors have to do from here on out is everyone who's going to benefit along the TOD line should be asked up front, what are you prepared to pay for? How can you help the city's treasury make this happen? I don't think that was asked as clearly and distinctly when they did Kaka'ako because I had left office. When we go down from Middle Street to Chinatown, I will ask that question.
Mufi, a 2019 audit said that you were part of a pattern of officials pledging the rail would be cheaper and faster than was reasonably foreseeable at the time. How do you respond to people who say that's evidence of dishonesty, that in October 2009 you said the project was shovel ready and it wasn't? What is your
It was
response?
shovel ready if we weren't held up by all these lawsuits. That's what happened. We were delayed. And I mentioned that challenge that was brought on by the city.
But the audit
sorry,
suggests
not
that
challenge
the
brought
delays
by the
came
city.
from premature contracting.
No, it was not premature contracting. I go again and let me restate. We got all three folks on board that approved of it. 2 federal agencies and the state procurement office.
So would you do it the same way again?
Well, if we were facing an economic recession, which is what we were facing at that time. So if you look at the bid that we put out, it was a good time to do that. And it was backed by the business community because we needed projects to get us going. And that was a perfect example of a construction project to go forward. Now, people weren't ready for that. It was challenges. You have to live with it. So I'm saying, I don't want to dwell in the past. All I'm saying going forward, it was legal. Okay? Nobody's gone to jail as a result of those projects being given at that time. So let's look at the positive aspect of getting rail on a good footing.
Even if it was legal, though, was it the right thing?
I believe it was the right thing to do if, in fact, people were prepared to support it. But there were a lot of challenges. And, you know, Judge, I want to be clear, there's going to continue to be challenges until people actually ride. Like H3, a lot of challenges. People, you know, stay lying in front of the tunnel, not wanting this to happen. But once it happened, you won't find anybody saying, going back in their past and saying, oh, you know, I was against that. They're all saying it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I really believe that's going to happen with rail. Once people ride, once they see the benefits, the conversation is going to change. But you need a strong leader to go back and say, you know what, let's do this together. And I also want to be clear, that's not going to be my first priority going back. I'm the only one that's come out with a comprehensive 5-point plan to get the city going. Health and safety first, bringing businesses back, making Honolulu a world-class city, minding the money, and secondly, and last but not least, making sure that we keep Honolulu on a green and sustainable path. It's detailed, it's written to the point where people can understand. The reason why my plan is believable is because I have the track record of being able to get these things done in the past.
Mufi, you know, you mentioned conflicts, and we have seen the Mauna Kea movement, even though it's not a city issue, spark these conflicts in the community over projects that have been approved by government. So what do you say to those nervous developers who said, I have the green light from government, and then the police who have to enforce the law, and Native Hawaiians who are willing to put their health at risk and be arrested for their causes.
So you say, what do I say, the
To
developers, or
each
what
of
do I
those
say?
groups.
Okay. Well, first of all, the developers need to recognize that community planning is a part of it. So I would like to investigate and look at every one of them. Was there enough community input? Was that community input ignored? What is this project actually going to do? Now, obviously, there's some that I won't be able to change because they're going forward. And if they're going forward, my feeling is that we have to continue to engage the community. And your educational efforts should not stop as a result of the fact that it's going forward. The other thing I'm going to insist upon is community benefits. No different when I was a council member and we faced this whole new world of big box retailers coming into town. And at that time, it was Home Depot. People in Pro City were nervous. What is this going to do to the character of our community? And the administration then wanted to do guaranteed zoning for purchase. I said that was wrong. Let's go back to the drawing board. That's exactly what we did. We went back to square one, made everybody bid again. Home Depot won out, but it was clear to Home Depot community benefits has to be a part of this. I will do that with projects that have already been approved. On the flip side, to whether they're Native Hawaiian or other groups here, once again, a mayor has to be at the table. A mayor leads by not sitting back and say, okay, my aides and consultants, you guys go and do the dirty work and let me know if there's good news. I'm going to be right up front. I'm going to be sitting with them. I'm doing that right now with members of the Native Hawaiian community as we talk about tourism and how we're going to bring it back. And my pledge is that you will be actively involved. We need to listen to what you have to say because that's important. This is Hawaii, this is our home, and you can't leave one person out because you're saying, oh, I'm going to do this because of jobs. That's not enough. You got to hear what they have to say and see how you can incorporate that as you move along.
Mufi, can you describe one of the most difficult periods of your life and how did you lift yourself out of it?
It was the death of my mom and dad. I still feel that today. I lost my mom when I was 18 years old. I lost my dad when I was 46. And everything that I am, everything that I hope to be, is due to my parents. I struggle with that every day, especially on memorable occasions like Father's Day, and going to my father's grave in Laie, and knowing that my mom is not buried here. It makes me feel that I have a mission in life to follow what they taught me, and that is to train up your child in the way that they should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it. So that's the biggest challenge that I have.
You know, Mufi, you and I are baby boomers. We're about the same age, and a lot of people say the baby boom generation is responsible for many of the chronic problems we have in this country right now. I'll give you a little bit of a moment to take your time to listen to this. You know, we still have global warming. We haven't addressed that. We have the problem of racism. We haven't fully addressed that. These problems of society that are chronic. And now the young people, who you just mentioned in your answer, have really overcome. They're the ones that are driving the change. Do you sometimes think now, why is this not now the time to hand the reins to people of that generation?
I disagree. My whole life has been about mentoring. I have a wonderful program that I was fortunate and blessed to have started called the Pacific Century Fellows. We've had 17 classes of cohorts of individuals who have come in their mid-20s to early 40s. They bond, they focus on solutions, they're looking proactively of how we can deal with some of these problems, and they've done exceptionally well across the board. That is what I'm going to continue to do. In my office, I have a very small staff, but the majority of them are millennials. My vice president is 32 years old. I really believe that's what leaders do. They prepare the next generation. So in my mind, who better to advise us on the challenges and the priorities that they have going forward other than this millennial generation? I've done that, so it's not just, fancy phrases or commitment. You look at my DNA, it's there. I also started a group called Hospitality Young Professional Entrepreneurs. All young people involved in the travel industry that also want to be able to be mentored. So my administration, you will see those folks involved. In my first cabinet, I had 6 former Pacific Century Fellows that were in my administration, holding important positions like the Department of Budget and Finance, the Corporation Council, the head of the Department of Community Services, the head of the Mayor's Office of Culture and Arts. I will do that, proactively do it. And why it's believable is I'm doing it now, not waiting till I become mayor and say, I need some young people. Let me try to see who I can bring into the office.
Mufi, you've been a public figure for a long time. When was the last time you changed your mind about something important?
I think my position on the importance of making sure that people feel that their voices count. You know, I'm a big guy. I can come across very strong and intimidating because it's not often that you find a 6'7" person who's in politics in our community. And so I've tried to adapt the way I speak, the way that they know that I'm truly listening. And because I'm prone to make decisive decisions, I think I want to do a better job of making sure that their voices were heard. There's always room for improvement. I've said during the course of this campaign, I've made mistakes in the past. I think I've overcome my shortcomings, and with age, gray hair, comes wisdom. So that is what I like to do a better job of is, you know, I'm going to make tough decisions as the mayor in trying to bring our economy back. People are not always going to be happy. I want to be very clear. You're never going to get 100% approval of everything that you want to do. But I think it's important, and some of the things that Jedra has brought out, that people understand that I was truly listening. I played by the books, and there's no hanky-panky going on. When I was mayor, I insisted that everyone in my cabinet go through ethics training, be able to comply with all the different types of discrimination in the workplace, violence in the workplace. We all had to do that from the mayor on down. And I don't think people fully grasp how important I believe that's a part of the administration. So this is going to be a part that I will work overtime in doing, because right now more than ever, people are questioning their government. They're doing it right here at home. Some of them are saying, wow, the evidence is such we should open up. And then there are those who say, no, don't open up. Spikes are occurring. So whoever comes down on that, once you make that decision, you got to make sure that that side that disagrees with you understands why you did it, and you're fully transparent about it.
Mufi, you were the singing mayor back in the day. What's your favorite song and why?
I think right now is, let me try again, let me try again. Think of all we had before, let me try once more.
Commercial now.
Is that going to be a commercial?
Let me ask though, along those lines, though, you know, you're running for office. You've lost several times, heartbreaking races, I'm sure, for you, but not small margins. And you know, you have the rail project hanging around your neck. You've explained your position very well on that. And also, you know, you're representing the hotel industry, which is not in great favor right now. So I just wonder, you know, are you running also to sort of redeem your reputation, to get back, you know, the gloss you maybe felt before when you were in office?
Darryl, that would not be a good reason to run. Gail still wonders, why am I giving up all these major increases in salary and the like, and taking care of my ohana, because I've also had 2 older brothers and a sister that's passed away. I'm doing that because of the people. Once again, if I was certain, you know, and their qualifications are excellent of everyone that's running, but legislators make laws. Individuals who haven't been in government, you have to question it. Are they ready for prime time? There's going to be a learning curve. So I'm running to put people back to work. Now let's talk about the losses. Keep in mind, I've won 4 of 5 county races. 4 of 5. I'm a moderate. I'm a centrist. I have a hard time in Democratic primaries that tend to vote very liberal. Okay, and it is what it is. County races I do well, including winning twice as mayor, because Democrats, Republicans, and independents find my message very appealing. I'm running as an independent. I've been an independent for several years now. So to me, if they look strictly on qualifications, experience, never mind about the past. We have someone running who also lost 3 races, 3 major races, you know? So, you know, it is what it is. You look forward, and I believe at this time, right man, right time to move this city forward, because we are in an economic crisis of proportions that we have never seen before.
What would
you say is your biggest regret from your previous time as mayor?
Maybe I should have stayed and finished the job as mayor. I get it. I get it from those who say, if you hadn't gone, I'd be riding the rail by now. If you hadn't gone, the rail would be in better shape. If you hadn't gone, we'd be able to make progress in homelessness and so forth, because you know how to bring the private sector in. I get it, mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa. But I thought at that time I was making the right decision to take those executive skills that I had basically mastered at the county level to the state level. The people said, no way, I get it. So
we wanted to move on to climate change.
Can I just finish this right here?
Go ahead.
So therefore, because this is an excellent question, therefore I think having gone through that, I want to make it clear, because people think I'm going to do the same in 2 years. Okay, I'm here now, I'm here to bring this economy back, and you can't do it in 2 years. There's no way. We're going to continue to struggle beyond 2 years of being in office. Thank you.
Go ahead, Chad.
You probably saw that report a couple of years ago. It's going to cost us $20 billion. Climate change, sea level rises are going to knock out roads, infrastructure, businesses, hotels. Talk about tough decisions. What are you going to do about what really is the issue of our time?
Well, let's take an advantage of being in the hospitality industry. All those hotels in Waikiki have proactive plans to deal with climate change. They're doing it right now. So you have the opportunity of someone who has a working relationship with them to continue to encourage them to put in that investment. No different than what the city needs to do. I like what Josh Stanborough has done with the current Office of Climate Sustainability. I want to take a closer look at that to see how in fact we can incorporate some of the things they're asking for, because it will take money, no question. And businesses have to understand that some of the requirements is going to require money. But here's the other thing again I bring to the table. I was a very active member of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. I was a steering committee member. There's opportunities there in a national effort to call attention on Congress to provide more funding for climate change as we go forward. And we have a good basis of a start that Josh Stanborough put together with input from the community. I want to build upon that and see how we can do this responsibly.
Hotels are projected to be underwater. Waikiki is projected to be flooded to the Alawai, the airport, downtown Honolulu. That's going to be more than just money. You may have to actually move a lot of these facilities inland. How are you going to lead that charge?
Well, that's all part of the discussion. Right now, I'm not a unknown to the owners. We've been having ongoing discussions because they're frustrated like everyone else. They want to put people back to work. So, it's not like when I call them, they're going to say, who are you? What's your name? It's Mayor Mufi on the line. They'll have to pick up, and they'll have to see that this is a need to have, not a nice to have. But it's not going to be like an eviction notice. You got to move now. It's going to be a phased approach. And if more needs to be done, we can't just rely on the private sector to do that. It has to also come from government. I mean, no different than what we're doing with the Waikiki Business Improvement District. Some of the things that we're doing along the shoreline there, working with WIA, is a public-private partnership. Private sector puts up money, but government also has to be ready to step up and provide funding.
Can I follow up though? Because climate change also, we have many, many shoreline communities. And many of these communities, like EA, places like that, those are not rich communities. And people are faced with losing their property. Even to this day, at a beach, there's waves that crash over houses, down there. What about those folks who don't have big resources for rebuilding or building up? How do you, as a county mayor, how would you help them?
Well, I would look to the private landowners. Laie has a major landowner there. So it's not just a hotel issue, if you will, but we're all in this together. And if they want to continue to be present in our islands, employ people, that's part of the community benefits package that has to be incorporated. But I want to be clear again, we should not foist all those expenses upon the county. I don't want the people to worry. They're the last ones that should worry about that. That's what government leaders do. They step up in times of crisis. And this is a crisis if we don't take care of it now. So let's take what has been done now and then be able to escalate it. And I really believe there's going to be opportunities at the federal funding level to get more federal funding, especially if you argue from the fact that we are an island, we're very susceptible to this, and this is something that could be very helpful in making that case going forward. We need additional funding.
But let me just ask, an individual property that's getting overrun, what would you do for that person? An individual homeowner owns his own property.
Well, we'll try to keep them there, and if they are in harm's way, we obviously have to relocate them.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, and I will do that. I will help them relocate.
Okay.
in a compassionate way.
Great, thank you.
Mufi, you know, you talk about mentoring and the next generation, and everyone at this table is here for our children, our keiki. What would be 3 words you would use, or the next generation would use, to describe you? Just 3 words.
Mufi loved us. Because the decisions I'm making today, take rail. We're not going to see the full benefits of that till it's all said and done. And they will reap the benefits of it. Or the infrastructure improvements that I've made at the city in the wake of that sewage spill. He thought about us. Every decision I make, Mahealani, I don't think short term. I think 2 or 3 steps down the road. And I believe that will come to pass, because I don't want them to remember me as the tallest mayor Honolulu's ever had, or the singingest mayor Honolulu's ever had. He actually did good by us.
Mufi Hannemann, thank you so much for your time and your insights.